Hi there, everybody. This is Mark Plunkett, the pastor of Heritage Presbyterian Church, and this is another of our weekly devotionals. This one talking about two things. First of all, a quote from Paul's letter to the Romans, and second of all, my very, very favorite great-great-aunt, my Aunt Betty. Now, let me tell you about Aunt Betty first. I met Aunt Betty. I really got to know her when she was 95. Her church was so small in this little bitty town that she lived in that the church was dissolving. And so my grandmother and my grandfather and I went that day because my grandmother had grown up in that church. And the church was full that day, which is kind of funny. But that's when I met Aunt Betty again. I had met her when I was a child, but I did not remember her. You know how it is when you're a child. Plus, we didn't see her very often. So it was just one of those things. But when I was in college and I met her again, she was one of the neatest people I ever met. And so I got to know her, and I visited her often at her retirement place. She lived in a retirement home in Lockhart, which is in Central Texas, not too far from Austin. So whenever my wife and I would go to Austin, we would stop and we'd visit Aunt Betty, or we'd see her on the way home. Well, I got a call from her one time when she was about 98 years old. And she said, "Mark, I have breast cancer. I have a tumor, and I'm going to have surgery." Well, I pretty much jumped in the car and went to see her. I don't remember exactly how I got there, but I was very upset. I was very upset. And I was so afraid that I was going to lose her this way. I mean, she was 98 years old, and I knew that she wouldn't live forever. But I just couldn't stand it that she might be taken this way. She was such a faithful woman. She had an unshakable faith. She was a kind woman. She was a true model of what I think a Christian should be. But I remember standing there and tears really starting to flow down my face. And she put her arms on my shoulder and she said, "Mark, don't you understand? I can't lose." And I just stopped and I said, "Aunt Betty, what are you talking about?" And she smiled at me again. She put her hands on my face. I remember that. And she said, "Mark, if this cancer kills me, I'll get to see Jesus. And if I survive, I get to see you, and I'll see Jesus later. Don't you see? I can't lose." Well, I kind of pulled myself together at least a little bit. And I talked to her for a few minutes, and I gave her a hug, and we prayed together. I remember that. And all the way home, I had a long conversation with God, and part of it was angry. How could you do this to this sweet old lady who's one of your best servants? And part of it was, God, please don't take her now. Please don't take her like this. Well, the Lord must have heard my prayer because she lived another 4 years. She didn't die until she was 101 and a half. And she's very proudly used to say to me, "I still have all my marbles." And she really did. Well, let me read you something that Paul said that I think Aunt Betty was holding on to that particular day. "So then, brothers and sisters, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the flesh, you will live." I think Aunt Betty was pretty much hanging on to, okay, the deeds of the flesh, we need to let go of. Deeds of the Spirit, that's what's going to save us all. I think that's what she was holding on to. Now, did she quote Paul's letter that day? No. But it's rung in my head ever since then that sometimes we're in a situation where we can't lose. If we die, we get to see Jesus. And if we live, we get to keep seeing the people we love and keep doing the work that we should be doing. Someday we'll all see Jesus, my friends. Think about that, won't you? Have a good day. Amen.